She was a woman of the law, respected, decorated, and feared by criminals across Madison County, Georgia. Sheriff Monique Baylor had seen death in combat, dragged bodies out of meth houses, talked gunmen out of suicide standoffs. She'd walked through blood more times than she could count, but nothing prepared her for what she found inside her own living room. It happened on a Tuesday night, quiet, humid, and thick with southern summer air. The kind of night where the cicadas scream and the bourbon burns a little slower. Monique had just come home from the department's annual awards dinner. She was in her dress uniform, shiny brass buttons and all, still clutching the plaque for outstanding service. People clapped for her, toasted to her, called her Madison's Iron Lady. And yet, as she walked into the house she shared with her husband, Caleb Reed, there was a weight in her chest that not even 10 shots of whiskey could melt. She had felt this weight before. In Kandahar, 2009, the last time she'd stood over someone bleeding out, wondering what part of them had just died, and what part of her was supposed to care. Back then, she wasn't a sheriff. She was Sergeant Monique Baylor, U.S. Army Military Police, 27 years old and already worn at the edges. The mission was a routine convoy escort that went sideways in the middle of a dust storm. IED blew the lead vehicle to hell, shrapnel everywhere. One of the drivers, Private Lucas Rowe, got his leg shredded, femoral artery torn open, screaming for his mother in a voice that cracked like glass. Monique knelt beside him and did what the field manual told her. Applied pressure, kept him conscious, barked orders until the medevac came. But she remembered one thing above all. She didn't feel a thing. Not fear, not panic, not even urgency. Just mechanical calm, like her brain had flipped a switch labeled "do the job." Turn off the rest. He survived. Barely. And at the debriefing later, her CO said, "That's the kind of clarity most men don't have under pressure. You're cold, Baylor, but you're useful." That word stayed with her. Useful. It became the way she measured her worth. Not warmth, not softness, just function. She came home with a chest full of medals and a head full of static. And when people asked her how it felt to serve, she'd smile and say, "You learn to live with the noise." But the truth was, she never turned the switch back on. She dated a few men over the years. Lawyers, paramedics, one high school football coach. But they always said the same thing before they left. "I can't feel you. You're like a wall." Until Caleb. Until the quiet man with gentle hands and too many books. The one who never pushed, never pried, never made her feel like she had to be anything more than still. He didn't ask to climb her walls. He just sat beside them. And for the first time, she let someone in, not because she was ready, but because he never asked her to be. So no, it wasn't the sex she missed. It was the stillness, the surrender. But that stillness had a price. And tonight, she could feel it cracking, because it was their anniversary. 1 year married, and they hadn't had sex. Not once. At first, Monique didn't question it. Caleb was different, quiet, bookish, thoughtful. A far cry from the street thugs and power-hungry cops she spent her life surrounded by. He worked at the local library, always brought her tea, held her hand at church, listened when she vented about dead bodies and crooked mayors. He was safe, gentle, God-fearing. But as months passed and Caleb continued to avoid intimacy, always with some excuse, a headache, stomach bug, fasting for Lent, Monique's patience turned to suspicion, then to frustration, then to something darker. That night, she had made up her mind. No more dodging, no more lies. She poured 2 glasses of bourbon, set the Bluetooth speaker to soft jazz, and waited for him to come out of the shower. When he stepped into the living room, still toweling his hair, she handed him the glass without a word. He accepted it, kissed her on the cheek, and sat down on the couch, as if everything was normal. They talked at first, about church, About his sister's new baby. About nothing. Then she leaned in. Do you love me, Caleb? He blinked. Of course I do. Then why won't you touch me? He froze. His eyes darted toward the old wooden cross hanging above the doorframe. The one Monique had insisted stay there, even after they'd repainted the living room. He stared at it like it might bless him. Or damn him. I tried before, he whispered. Monique set her glass down with a clink. It's been a year, Caleb. I've waited. I've prayed. I've been understanding. But I'm not stupid. I'm not ready, he said, eyes low. Ready for what? I'm your wife. For a moment, Caleb looked like he was about to speak. Not just speak, confess. His eyes darted toward the old wooden cross hanging above the doorframe. The one Monique had insisted stay there, even after they'd repainted the living room. He stared at it like it might bless him. Or damn him. I tried before, he whispered. Monique tilted her head. Tried what? He opened his mouth, closed it. His throat bobbed. At church, that day, before a license appointment. I was going to tell you something. Right before Pastor Green handed us the premarital forms. You remember? She didn't. He did. He remembered her smile, the way she squeezed his hand so hard, like it meant forever. He remembered the lump in his throat, the weight in his chest. But then someone had called him forward, and she had looked at him like he was everything she prayed for. And so, he said nothing. He looked away now. Forget it. He looked like a trapped animal. She could see it, panic rising behind his calm little facade. She reached forward, gently, but firmly, and tugged at the waistband of his sweatpants. He jerked back. Monique, don't. But it was too late. The pants came down, and what she saw, or didn't see, made her stumble back like she'd been punched. There was nothing. No penis. No testicles. Just smooth scar tissue where something should have been. Her mouth fell open. Her vision tunneled. Her heart beat like a war drum in her ears. What the hell is this? She rasped. Caleb dropped to his knees. I was going to tell you. I swear, I didn't mean to lie. I thought maybe I could live normally for once. Please, please, don't freak out. Don't freak out, she snapped, voice cracking. You married me. You stood in a church. You signed those papers. And you didn't think to mention this. I thought I could be enough, just as I am. You're not a man, she screamed. I am, he said softly, shaking, in every way that matters. Something in her cracked. A fuse blew. The room went red. She reached for her holster. And by the time she heard the first gunshot, it was already too late. Caleb collapsed backward, eyes wide, mouth open in disbelief. Blood bloomed across his chest. 1 shot, 2, 3, 4, 5. The music kept playing. Bourbon spilled onto the rug. And Monique stood there, breathing like a soldier in battle, hand trembling around her Glock, eyes locked on the lifeless body of the man. No, the person she had married. And all she could whisper, as the sirens approached, was, he lied to me. The call came in at 11:47 p.m. Officer involved shooting. 1 down. Possible domestic. Shooter is Sheriff Monique Baylor. When Deputy Curtis Green pulled into the driveway of Monique's brick suburban home, he expected a burglary gone wrong, or maybe some intruder who underestimated the wrong household. What he didn't expect was to find Monique Baylor, still in her dress uniform, sitting on the front porch steps with her service weapon resting on the ground beside her. Her eyes were hollow, her lipstick smudged, her hands covered in blood. He lied to me, she murmured again, as if those words were her last thread of sanity. Inside the house, Caleb Reed's body lay sprawled across the beige carpet, half naked, soaked in blood. 1 bullet had torn through his chest, another through his stomach. 1 grazed his inner thigh. 2 more shattered bone, arm and rib. The TV was still playing jazz. The bourbon glass had tipped and formed a dark halo on the rug. Monique told the officers it was self-defense. He came at me. He snapped. I tried to calm him down, but he lunged. I had no choice. Her voice was measured, almost rehearsed. A decade in law enforcement had taught her the right things to say when chaos struck. She knew to cry, but not too much. She knew when to lower her tone, when to invoke fear, when to mention trauma. She knew the playbook, but something about it didn't sit right with Detective Tasha Liddell, the lead on-scene investigator. Tasha had worked under Monique before Monique became sheriff. She'd admired her, worshipped her even, but as she stood over Caleb's body that night, she didn't see a break-in, or a fight, or an ambush. She saw a clean kill. The gunshot wounds were tight, precise, not the erratic spray of panic. And Caleb's hands? No bruises, no cuts, no signs of struggle. The physical evidence spoke louder than Monique's badge. Still, it was going to be a delicate dance. Arresting the sheriff wasn't just procedural, it was political. So for the first 24 hours, the department played it soft. Monique was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. She was free to go home. But Caleb never made it to the morgue as just another John Doe. The medical examiner, Dr. Charles Miles, called the next morning. "We got something unusual," he said carefully over the phone. Tasha met him at the lab. What she saw laid out on the stainless steel table made her stomach twist. No penis. No scrotum. The subject presents with a reconstructed perineum, common in transmasculine surgical patients. But this isn't from surgery. There are no scars consistent with phalloplasty or metoidioplasty. It's congenital, or possibly the result of early trauma. "What are you saying?" Tasha asked. "I'm saying Caleb Reed may have been born biologically female, or suffered something catastrophic as a child. But either way, Monique's story doesn't line up." Tasha's mind spiraled. If Monique knew this before the shooting, it would explain her rage. If she didn't, why kill him? And why lie? She filed a warrant to seize Caleb's laptop, which had been sitting untouched on a shelf in his study. That was when everything cracked open. Inside the laptop were over 30 video files. Personal, private video diaries. The first one dated back to 2 months before the wedding. But the videos weren't the only thing they found. Tucked behind the laptop sleeve, in a manila folder bound with black ribbon, was a journal. Handwritten, faint creases across the leather cover. The first page simply read, "For the version of me I never got to be." Detective Tasha Liddell flipped through it with latex gloves, careful not to smudge the ink. The entries weren't dated. They weren't even linear. But every line dripped with quiet desperation. "Sometimes I stand in the mirror and whisper, 'You made it,' just to see if I believe myself that day. She thinks I'm soft because I don't fight. But the truth is, I've been fighting since the day I knew I wasn't what the world wanted me to be." One entry, scrawled hastily across 2 full pages, hit hardest. I wanted to tell her. Every day, when she falls asleep beside me, breathing deep like someone who survived something, I almost speak. But then I think about that badge, that gun on the nightstand, that voice she uses when she talks about people who lie. She doesn't know that not telling isn't about deception. It's about safety. It's about survival. It's about hoping maybe this time I get to just exist without explanation. But maybe the silence had started long before Monique. One of the journal entries tucked between those lines recounted a different memory entirely, one Caleb had never spoken about, not even in his video diaries. "I was 14 when my mother found the binder. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just picked it up with 2 fingers like it was something rotting. The next morning, she drove him 6 hours south to a restorative Christian retreat in Florida, a 2-week program for confused girls with identity disorders." That's what the pamphlet said. It had a picture of a lake and a Bible verse about redemption. They took my phone. my clothes, cut my hair, told me God only listened when I used the right name. That was the first time I heard someone pray for my soul while calling me an abomination. He wasn't allowed to speak unless spoken to. Meals were monitored. Notes were confiscated. One night, he got caught passing a letter to a boy named Evan who also refused to say she when talking about himself. The next day, Evan was gone. Caleb never saw him again. They said he left early, but I heard the nurses whisper. I saw the blood on his sheets. He finished the program, smiled for the photo, said amen when they gave him a purity ring. But a week later, when his mother dropped him back home and told him to never shame this family again, he went to the backyard, dug a hole behind a shed, and buried the ring like it was a dead pet. I thought if I could just stay quiet long enough, maybe I'd be safe. Not loved, just safe. Years later, when he met Monique, he thought maybe God had finally changed his mind. She was strong, clear, decisive. Everything the world told him he wasn't. She made him feel not just safe, but steady. I wasn't trying to lie. I was trying to matter. I wonder what it says about me, that I'd rather die as her husband than live as her disappointment. The final page of the journal was blank, except for one sentence in the center. Is a betrayal if all I ever wanted was to be enough? Tasha closed the book slowly. She had seen 1,000 case files in her career. But this wasn't evidence. It was a eulogy. In the footage, Caleb sat in the same living room where he'd later be murdered. The camera was shaky. His voice was soft. My name is Caleb Reed. I was born Callie Renee Walker. I transitioned over 10 years ago. I've lived in fear ever since. Not because I regret who I am, but because I know people like Monique. In the next few videos, his tone grew more desperate. She's strong, controlling. She likes being the one in charge, but she has no idea who she married. He spoke of moments he tried to tell her. Times he'd almost opened his mouth at church, in bed, at the dinner table. Every time, she'd shut him down. She told me once, I don't play with secrets. I've killed for less. I laughed. She didn't. There were tears in the final video, recorded just 3 nights before he died. If you're watching this, I'm probably gone. And if it was her who did it then, I hope someone finally sees me for who I am, not what I wasn't. When Tasha finished watching the last clip, her hands were trembling. It wasn't just a homicide. It was an execution of a secret, of a person, of a truth that Sheriff Monique Baylor couldn't bear to live with. She issued the arrest warrant that same night. And by the time news broke the next morning, the world had already picked sides. The courtroom was packed, not with just locals, but reporters, activists, churchgoers, retired cops, college kids, and rainbow pins. Everyone had a stake in what had happened inside that brick house in Madison County. Everyone had an opinion about what it meant when a woman like Sheriff Monique Baylor, war veteran, law enforcer, beloved black icon, gunned down her husband for hiding the truth about his body. The prosecution came in hard. They painted a picture of a man, Caleb Reed, who lived in quiet agony, who feared the day his secret would kill him. A man who tried to love the woman he married with everything he had, even when she loved only what she thought he was. They played the videos, all of them. The courtroom held its breath as Caleb's voice echoed through the speakers, raw and scared and heartbreakingly human. She wouldn't understand. She wouldn't stay. But I wanted to try. Just once. Just one person who might see me for me. Some people wept. Others looked away. Monique didn't flinch. The defense argued that Caleb had deceived her, that his omission was a form of betrayal so intimate, so psychologically devastating. It pushed Monique into a dissociative episode. She was in a state of emotional shock, her attorney claimed. Imagine finding out, suddenly, violently, that your marriage was built on a lie, that the person in your bed was someone you couldn't even categorize anymore. They brought in a trauma psychologist, talked about her PTSD from the Army, her fear of dishonesty, her rigid attachment to truth and order. They argued she wasn't a murderer. She leaned in, almost touching the glass with her fingers. But the difference between you and me, Sheriff Baylor, is that I never claimed to love him and still made myself his judge, jury, and executioner. Monique looked away. I didn't know, she muttered. Vivian exhaled slowly. You knew something, maybe not the details, but you knew the fear in his eyes. You knew how tightly he held himself at night, and you still made him believe he was safe. A long silence hung between them. Then Vivian added, I didn't come here for closure. I came to look you in the eye and say this. I forgive you. Monique snapped her head back. Why? Because hate already killed my child. I won't let it keep killing me. Vivian stood, placed her phone down, and gathered her purse. Before leaving, she said one final thing through the glass. Don't mistake my forgiveness for forgetting. You are not free from what you've done. But maybe, if you're lucky, you'll learn to live with it. Monique sat there for a long time after she left, phone still to her ear, listening to the hum of silence on the other end. Monique didn't speak for 3 days after reading it. Meanwhile, outside the prison walls, a storm was brewing. The LGBTQ plus community turned Caleb Reed's story into a rallying cry. His face, once anonymous, now printed on posters, murals, protest banners. A soft smile, a caption underneath, let me be seen. One of those posters ended up on the wall of a high school guidance office in Birmingham, Alabama. It was taped beside a rainbow sticker and a worn-out suicide prevention hotline poster. And for 17-year-old Micah Darnell, it was the first time he ever saw someone who looked like him, quiet, soft-spoken, black, and trans. On the wall, not just in his mirror. Micah had come out only to his journal. His parents were strict Pentecostals. His friends thought they slashed them was a phase. He wore hoodies year-round to hide his binder, and he faked stomach cramps to avoid gym class. At night, he stared at his ceiling and prayed for a day where he could tell the truth without being punished for it. When news of Caleb's story went viral, Micah watched all the videos. He read every article. He knew every quote by heart. I hope someone finally sees me for who I am, not what I wasn't. He wrote that line on the inside cover of his geometry textbook. 3 weeks later, he was found in the school bathroom, wrist slit, a note folded beside his body. It read, if Caleb had made it, maybe I could too, but all I see is what happens when people like us tell the truth. The town tried to move on. The school offered counseling. The principal released a statement about mental health awareness. But someone leaked the note to the media. And suddenly, Caleb's face was on the news again, this time beside Micah's. 2 victims, 2 bodies, years apart, but somehow connected. The headline read, Teen suicide sparks renewed outrage over Caleb Reed case. For the public, it was a gut punch. For Monique, it was a ghost. She read the article in the prison library, alone. She traced Micah's face with one shaking finger. He looked like Caleb. He looked like 100 kids she'd never protected. He looked like the cost of silence. That night, she didn't sleep. She didn't pray. She just sat on the edge of her bunk, holding the news clipping in her lap, and wondered how many more would have to die before the truth stopped being a weapon. Vigils were held across the country. In Atlanta, in Chicago, even in front of the White House. His video diaries were played in college classrooms, in training sessions for therapists, on podcasts titled Love, Lies, and the Cost of Silence. A scholarship was founded in his name for trans men of color pursuing degrees in literature, because that's what Caleb had wanted to be once. A writer. He'd even started a manuscript. Half-finished chapters were found on a flash drive tucked in his sock drawer. The working title? Borrowed Skin. But Monique never saw any of that. She remained silent during all interviews, declined all appeals. She also declined the warden's invitation to attend a gender identity and empathy workshop hosted by a nonprofit for inmate education. Twice. But the third time, something in her cracked. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe guilt. Maybe she was just tired of saying no to things. She showed up late, sat in the back. The room wasn't large, just 12 folding chairs in a circle and a whiteboard with the word understanding scrawled across the top. The facilitator was a young man named Dre. Slim build, buzzed hair, gold crucifix around his neck. He introduced himself plainly. I'm a trans man. I was a foster kid. I did time, and I'm still standing. So I figured maybe y'all could listen for a minute. Some inmates rolled their eyes. One woman walked out. Monique stayed. Dre didn't preach. He didn't debate. He just told stories. About getting beaten at 13 for wearing a baseball cap. About forging his first ID just to get a gym membership. About the time a woman kissed him, found out he was trans, and slapped him across the face while screaming he was a freak. I don't expect y'all to get it, he said. I just want to show you what it looks like when someone survives long enough to tell the story. At the end, he passed around blank note cards. If you got a question, write it. Doesn't matter how ignorant. I've heard worse. Monique stared at her card for a long time. She didn't write a question. She wrote a sentence. They weren't trying to deceive me. They were trying to survive me. She didn't put her name on it. Didn't need to. Dre read it out loud. Paused. Then said softly, "That's the whole damn point." The room went still for a moment. Then someone in the back scoffed. An older woman with faded prison ink on her neck and a voice like gravel. "Whole damn point?" she muttered. "You people always talking like you invented pain. Don't matter what parts you got. Life still kicks your ass." A few heads nodded. Some rolled their eyes. Dre stayed calm. Nobody said this was a competition. But before he could continue, Monique spoke. Just 2 words. "Enough, Darla." The room froze. Even Dre blinked. It was the first time Monique had raised her voice in any group session. The older woman turned around. "Excuse me." Monique's tone was flat, controlled, but unmistakably sharp. "You don't get to measure someone else's pain by the size of your own." Darla opened her mouth again, but Monique cut her off. "You've had your battles. So have I. But that boy." She nodded toward Dre. "He stood in front of this room and handed you his throat. The least you can do is not step on it." Silence. No applause. No affirmations. Just quiet acknowledgement. And for once, Monique didn't flinch under the weight of eyes on her. She didn't speak again that day. But after the session, Dre walked past her, paused, and said softly, "Thank you." She didn't reply, but her shoulders didn't drop as quickly as they used to. When the session ended, Monique didn't speak to anyone. She walked back to her cell, sat down on her bunk, and looked at her hands like they belonged to someone else. That night, she dreamed of Caleb for the first time in years. He wasn't angry. He wasn't bleeding. He was sitting on the church steps in his gray suit, hands folded in his lap, looking up at her with eyes that asked nothing, except maybe to be seen. In her 5th year behind bars, she agreed to join a mandatory trauma counseling group. The facilitator asked each inmate to bring a photo of the person they'd hurt most. Monique brought a picture from her wedding. She and Caleb standing on the steps of Mount Zion Church. She in her dress uniform. Him in a slate gray suit. The sun spilling gold behind them. His hand in hers. His eyes uncertain. She stared at the photo for nearly a minute. Then said, "I didn't know how to love someone I didn't understand." No one replied. Years passed. Public interest waned. But once a year, on the anniversary of his death, Caleb's sister posted the same message on social media. "You can't shoot away the truth. You can only kill the person who carried it." And every time, it went viral again. Because this wasn't just a murder case. It was a mirror. held up to a country still at war with identity, honesty, and the unbearable cost of being different. It was raining the day she cried, 7 years into her sentence. The sky outside was the color of old bruises, heavy, aching. Water beat down on the metal roof of Baldwin State like a steady fist. Inmates sat quiet in the mess hall, picking at cornbread and overcooked greens. But Monique didn't move. She stared at the wall, at nothing. That morning, she'd received a visitor. Unscheduled, unannounced. A young man in his 20s. Black, slender, with warm brown eyes and a nervous energy that seemed too big for his body. He stood behind the plexiglass divider, hands shaking slightly as he picked up the phone. She hesitated before doing the same. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said. "You don't know me, but I knew Caleb." Her grip on the phone tightened. "I was in the same online support group. For trans men," he explained. "He helped me. A lot. He used to say, even if he died tomorrow, he just wanted one person to feel less alone." Silence. "I'm that person," the boy added, voice cracking. Monique didn't speak. Couldn't. He looked down, embarrassed. "Anyway, I don't want to take your time. I just thought maybe it mattered to know he did something good, even in the middle of all the mess." She stared at him. His posture, his eyes, his voice. Soft, honest, so much like Caleb. Before the guards called time, the boy pressed a folded piece of paper to the glass. "I printed something, a poem he wrote. It wasn't finished, but the visit ended." Monique sat with that paper for 2 full days before she unfolded it. There were only a few lines, typed in a messy font, uneven margins, but the words sliced clean through. "I am not your deception. I am not your shame. I am not what you lost. I am what you feared you'd never understand." She read it once, then again, and again, and then the tears came. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet streams that wouldn't stop. It was the first time anyone had seen her break. Not during the trial, not after the sentencing, not even when the world turned its back. But there, in a prison cell, with a half-finished poem in her hand, and no one left to lie to, Monique Baylor finally fell apart. Because the truth had never really been Caleb's burden. It had always been hers. And by the time she saw that, there was no one left to forgive her. 2 years later, the prison chaplain found a letter wedged inside the back pew of the chapel. No name, no envelope, just a folded sheet of paper, damp with sweat and time, tucked behind the Gideon Bible. It was written in Monique's precise handwriting, tight, clipped, the way she used to write arrest reports. But the contents weren't about crime, or justice, or self-defense. They were about grief. When I put on a uniform, I thought it made me untouchable. When I wore the badge, I thought it made me right. When I said my vows, I thought it made me whole. But truth doesn't care what you wear, and it sure as hell doesn't care what you believe. The chaplain didn't tell anyone. He folded the letter back up, placed it in the prison's chaplaincy archives, and marked it with a single word: reckoning. By then, Monique had been transferred to the medium security unit. Her behavior had been exemplary. She led a peer counseling group for inmates dealing with emotional trauma. Some called it irony. Others called it healing. But she never spoke Caleb's name again. And yet, outside those walls, his name had become something else entirely. A streaming platform released a docu-series titled The Lie That Got Me Killed. It chronicled Caleb's life, his relationship with Monique, and the cultural firestorm that followed. It hit 2.1 million views in 48 hours. One scene from the series stood out: a shaky video of Caleb reading a passage from his journal, filmed weeks before his death. If someone ever tells you who they are, believe them. If someone can't, love them gently anyway. Because truth doesn't always arrive with confidence. Sometimes it knocks with a trembling hand. That clip flooded TikTok. Young people stitched their own truths to it, coming out videos, forgiveness messages, whispered apologies to mirrors. Caleb's face, soft, unsure, brave, became a quiet revolution. Churches debated what truth meant in the eyes of God. Law schools debated what truth meant in the eyes of justice. But Monique, she just got older. Gray streaks overtook her once perfect bun. Her back curved from years of tension. Her hand shook slightly when she passed out coffee at group meetings. She still refused interviews, still kept her cell clean, still counted days. One night, when the air in her cell felt too thick to breathe, Monique pulled out a pencil stub and a sheet of paper she'd folded and refolded so many times the creases had become part of its skin. She didn't date the letter, didn't address it with "Dear Caleb." She just began. I used to think silence was strength, that if I didn't say it, feel it, cry it, then it couldn't own me. That's what the Army taught me, what the badge reinforced, what I carried into every room like a shield. You were the first person I didn't try to command. You didn't require my voice to love me. You just showed up, quietly, and stayed. And I mistook that silence of yours for something I could control, something that made me safe. But you weren't safe, were you? You were terrified of me, of what I'd do if I knew. And the part that tears me open isn't that you hid it. It's that you were right, too. The pencil paused here. She exhaled, then continued. I've watched your videos. I've read your words. I know now that you didn't keep secrets to hurt me. You kept them to survive me. And the horror of it all is that I didn't just kill you. I confirmed every fear you ever had about being real with someone. She scratched something out, wrote over it. I don't want forgiveness. That's not why I'm writing this. I wouldn't even know what to do with it. But I needed to say this somewhere, even if no one ever reads it. She ended the letter not with love, not with goodbye, but with a single word: shame. Then folded the paper carefully, placed it inside her old Bible, and tucked it between the pages of Psalms 139. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. She left it there. No guards ever saw it. No one ever opened it. But that night, she slept with her hand resting on the cover of the Bible, like it was a wound she finally admitted was hers. And every year, on the anniversary of Caleb's death, she asked the warden for one request: silence. No calls. No programs. No movement. Just 1 hour where the prison stood still. No one ever asked why. But the guards understood. Some truths weren't meant to be shouted. Some were meant to haunt. In her 12th year of incarceration, Monique Baylor received a letter she never expected. It came on plain white stationery. No return address. Just her inmate number written in small, careful script on the envelope. She opened it slowly, hands trembling from age or nerves. She didn't know which. Inside were only two things: a photo and a note. The photo showed a child, maybe 5 or 6 years old, beaming with missing teeth, standing in front of a public library with a backpack too big for his frame. Clutched in his hands was a worn copy of The Giving Tree. The note read, "His name is Ellis. He's mine, but in a way, he's also Caleb's. Because if Caleb hadn't stood up for who he was, I wouldn't have found the courage to become who I am." No name, no signature, nothing else. But Monique stared at that photo for a long time. Something in her chest stirred. Not peace, not regret. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when you finally stop running from the thing you did. That night, she sat on her bunk long after lights out, holding the photo like it might disappear. She didn't cry. Not this time. There were no more tears left in her. Instead, she whispered something into the dark. Something that didn't ask for forgiveness. Something that didn't beg for absolution. Just 3 words she'd never said out loud. Not even in court. I was wrong. And the walls didn't answer. The ceiling didn't crack. But for the first time in 12 years, Monique Baylor slept through the night. No flashbacks. No sirens in her dreams. Just silence. And somewhere, maybe in a classroom, maybe on a playground, a little boy named Ellis turned another page in a book, unaware that his existence had softened the heart of a woman the world had long since written off. Some stories don't end with justice. Some don't end with revenge. They just end. But this one, it ended with truth. And that was more than Caleb ever got in life. But somehow, through Ellis, through every kid learning to exist without apology, it would be enough. But the question that still lingers is this. If someone loves you with everything but hides one part of who they are, did they betray you? Or were they just trying to survive you?